All right, and actually to build off of that, with that back lot that I'm currently using for those boats and RVs, I'm actually in the process of transitioning to building some ADUs there. So I'm kind of going through that. It's kind of the San Diego way, and I'm actually finding that as I'm going through that process, it's right with almost as many regulatory hurdles as we see in this industry. So I'm getting it from kind of multiple directions here right now. But yeah, in any case, I think I already introduced myself on the panel, but just to run through it real quick for those that might not have been in the room. Again, I'm the Associate Director of Digital Communications over at Crinetics Pharmaceuticals. I'm basically the primary digital steward for all of the digital experience that we drive through all the different channels. Yeah, I want to talk a little bit today about how to make our customer journeys more seamless, how to make everything that we do essentially more efficient and effective using the right data. And so to start off with, actually, let's get a quick poll in the room here. On a scale of 1 to 10, or sorry, let's go 1 to 5. 1 to 5, how would everyone today rate how seamless their customer journeys they're creating across the organization are today? Let's start with the 1 star. Anybody 1 star? No, we're confident in here today. I like it. Okay. 2 stars.
I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the honesty too. Yeah, 3 stars. 3 stars, 4 stars. Guessing this is where we're going to see it. 5 stars. Perfect, seamless customer experience right off the bat today. Buddy, okay. So I didn't see any hands for 5 stars, actually. I was going to say, if you did raise your hand, actually, you can leave the room. You've figured all of this out already, and I don't need to give this presentation. But for those of us that are not at that 5 stars yet, myself included, and yeah, I think, again, let's get into some ways to make this happen. Now, start off with, the volume of data that we're creating and capturing today keeps going up. I've heard this come up in a few presentations over the course of the past 2 days, and this trend is going to continue, right? Even with restrictions, new privacy things coming into place, restrictions around what we can capture, I think it's going to continue. Now, the thing about that too is customer journey optimization is already top of mind for most people. I mean, if you look at almost half of organizations cite this as a priority. It's not that we're not thinking about it per se. It's just that we're not properly leveraging the data to make this happen. According to the data here, 70% of it is literally never used. So it's captured, we've got the systems in place, we're pulling it into all of these different platforms that we have, we're not doing anything with it. Only a fourth of organizations actually considers themselves truly data-driven. Honestly, I think that's probably ambitious even. And then even when we are capturing the right data, and even when it's there and in place, again, you've got almost a third of organizations that say they lack the skills to do what they need to do with it. Now, for companies that are able to do this well, of course, as we all know, there's an increase in profitability here. I mean, this is creating a seamless customer journey, using the right data. Things get better. But how do we actually do it? What are the steps that we need to take to get there? So if we think about it this way, just to create an analogy for everyone here, the data, and if we're trying to get our key stakeholders into space, the data is kind of like the rocket fuel to make this happen. And the right compartments, the right, cases around that data, the right rockets, if you will, are kind of the rocket boosters to use that fuel to actually take us there. So running with that analogy, rocket booster number 1, who, what, where? This is diving deep on your audience. And what I'm talking about here is going through the exercise to create an in-depth view of your key audiences, of all the different stakeholder groups that we're targeting. And so I'm talking about building out ideal, detailed personas. The more granular you can get, the better here. And I'm talking about including things like behavioral data, psychographic data, get down into really what makes these HCPs, these patients tick. Again, what are their wants, their needs, their desires, their pain points, like building all that. This kind of ensures that everything else that you collect and everything else you do from a data perspective moving forward is going to be properly Evihn. So it's kind of like establishing your North Star to start off with. And it's important that this is step one. To build off that too, it's also considering the spaces in which they're most engaged, where they're spending their time right now. There are certain platforms, certain areas on social, website sections where they're currently engaged, communities that you can tap into to get this kind of information. And as a bonus there for non-patient audiences, you can leverage something even like an IP address tracking tool to really get down to hard data on where they're spending time on your web properties. Which leads me to rocket booster number 2, straight from mission control. Just ask. Now, it seems rather basic, but we're talking about surveying groups for crucial data here. So collecting it directly from the customers in all of the different ways that you typically do this. ATUs, awareness studies, conversations, not just recorded conversations with patient advocacy, with sales, but capturing that information in written form too. Just having your teams properly leverage your CRM platform to capture this stuff for positioning purposes. This helps essentially answer a lot of the questions that you're trying to answer when creating those ideal stakeholder personas that I talked about on the last slide, right? Yeah, things like top needs, top pain points, goals. And the thing is, if you don't have this data, and if you're not capturing it, which I imagine most of us here are in some capacity already, if you need to fill in the gaps, you can buy it too. There's other people already doing this kind of research, and again, that can be applicable and worth it. And then I included this at the end here, actually use the data. I've seen so many cases of where there's a ton of money spent on this, there's all this time spent putting this together, and then the data just sits there. Again, going back to that stat that I showed at the beginning there, what was it, 70% of data isn't actually used. Actually use this. Which gets me to rocket booster number 3, a lay of the customer experience galaxy. So this is taking stock of what the customer experience looks like today and taking pieces from that and incorporating it in whatever it is that you're building out. So this is mapping out the whole thing and mapping out the different iterations of what that looks like today. Now, realize, capturing this and kind of capturing it for all of the different stakeholders and journeys is kind of an arduous process, and it's hard to kind of come up with the hard data on that. But to the best of your abilities, what are the typical touch points? Are there multiple ways that people are primarily arriving there? What's been most impactful, least impactful? Just kind of take from anything that you have currently and try to incorporate that as you move forward. And then you can do the same thing for your competitors, right? So you often leverage information from things like communities, forums. People are talking about their experiences with these brands already today. And again, you can pull from that and use it to kind of get a step ahead, even if you haven't necessarily already run and created a customer journey to whoever it is you're targeting. Rocket booster number 4, less spaghetti, cleaner walls. What's worked and why? Well, kind of to take that a step further, talking about the expanse of the customer journey, if we take it a step down, I'm referring more to the tactical side of things here. So targeting, messaging, content, funnel design, looking at your KPIs here. What drove the highest engagement? What actually led to the creation of leads and opportunities? Again, the further down the funnel you can tie these things, the better. Again, what led to the desired outcomes ultimately? And again, it's not just taking from the data on your campaigns and your experiences that you've built out for these different stakeholders. It's also examining what your competitors have been doing. And there's listening tools that can get you there. More and more of them have AI implementations also that make it even more effective. But I'm talking about things like BrandWatch, SpyFu, SimilarWeb. Again, kind of mapping all the different activities that are happening, capturing that data, and feeding it to you in a consumable format that allows you to draw insights from it as you're designing this. Okay, Rocket booster number 5. Don't sell yourself short. So I'm talking about maximizing for the activity that's already happening out there from a search perspective. And of course, that's inclusive of things like, the search activity happening on search platforms and on things like Google, right? High volume, upward trending, low competition keywords. Looking at what your competitors are doing, kind of seeing where the gaps may exist there, where there's opportunities for you, where gaps are in their strategy. But I'm also talking about the same criteria outside of search engines, because that's just one place. Talking about the search happening in YouTube, for example. That's the search activity happening on social media platforms. And then, of course, in generative engines also. There's, of course, a lot of queries happening there. I heard somebody earlier today say 6% of all search queries happen in GPTs now. Honestly, I'm surprised it's not higher than that. But yeah, one great way to test out how you're appearing in GPTs is using GPTs. You can use a tool like Perplexity. Essentially, you can go in there and just ask questions and observe. Because a lot of the time, with some of these, you can see them coming up. It'll tell you exactly what sources are being used to generate these responses. And you can ask for that specifically too. You can ask it to source it. So again, you can see if you're being brought into the information and the feedback that it's generating. Rocket booster number 6. Drop a penny, save a dime. Small-scale testing. So talking here about running a test before you launch kind of your broader campaign or your broader digital product. Again, maybe it's a web experience, whatever it is. Launch a paid test. This is particularly effective when you have kind of one or two variables. You're relatively sure. Again, you've kind of gone through all the other data steps that I've just talked about. But again, there's kind of a couple outstanding questions there. You've gotten to a somewhat final product. But again, you can leverage a small amount of money, just enough to be statistically significant, basically, to make it so that by the time you get to the real launch, you've already tested that messaging. You've already tested those creatives. You've already figured out which channels your audience is going to respond to best. So by the time it comes down to it, A, you save some money because you're spending less money testing, and B, you have an optimized experience from the get-go, and you've got the data to prove it. Which leads me finally to rocket booster number 7. And this is getting ahead of global changes, which, as we all know, are happening faster and faster, and future-proofing our approach to the greatest extent possible. Now, that's never going to happen 100%, but of course, this is optimizing your digital experience, making sure you're capturing as much of that first-party data as possible, building out that data set, and building out the MarTech stack to make it happen. So just as some examples of things you can do here, you can leverage a data onboarding tool like LiveRamp, bring in the first-party data. This is particularly effective on the HTTP side, where perhaps you're capturing a lot of people's professional information, but you're looking to target them in places where their personal information is actually primarily what sits in the databases from a targeting perspective, right? So again, you can kind of take that, enhance it, and expand the reach, make sure you're reaching more of the audiences you've already painstakingly captured. Collect zero-party data whenever you get a chance to. So thinking about things built into all of your digital experiences, quizzes, tools, calculators, use these as opportunities to ask questions to these different audiences. Again, really build that progressive user profile as you go on. Optimize your web tracking cookie opt-in process. I've seen a couple implementations of these where there's been new versions of this that have rolled out, and essentially it becomes flying in the dark. You've got 95% drop-off, and especially in places, if you're a global company like the EU, where there's the strictest regulations here, because you've got everybody opting out of tracking. So you're losing all of your web tracking capabilities there. You're not seeing what's happening, and you're not able to go through any of the steps I just talked about there. So finally, and I could do, and several people have done presentations just on this over the course of the past 2 days here. Predictive analytics AI engines, Viva, IQVIA. Again, any way that you can better leverage all of the data that you're collecting, assuming you have it properly structured in the right place, to combine insights across that first and third party data, naturally that's got to be a focus here too. But putting it all together. So I'm actually pulling on, I think I mentioned earlier, I actually come over from the medical devices / biotech side. I'm a relatively recent pharma convert, but pulling from my Illumina experience here in particular. This was a second phase launch for a product, and it actually, with about $200K investment, generated 150 MQLs for this $1 million instrument. But it incorporated all of what I just talked about there. So again, we had kind of an exercise where we put together a very in-depth ideal customer profile there, created a couple very defined segments as a result of everything that we learned from that exercise and from just reviewing the customer experience, the customer journey. Again, we looked at all the performance of everything, the best performing elements, the messaging, looked at how things were progressing from a search perspective, where the opportunities still lie, where we kind of already had achieved, had conquested, again, from a search perspective. Used a whole suite of different paid channels here and essentially drove to 2 very distinct experiences, again, just based on the segments that we put together. Ultimately generating a 50% increase in MQLs with half the budget that we had to use in phase 1. So I'd say, in this instance, mission accomplished. So in summary, I mean, I won't go through all of these again, but again, just to kind of capture it in a single place, build those deep audience profiles, ask for the data directly when you can, capture it, kind of marry that with the tribal knowledge that you've already put together. Look at those existing customer journeys, leverage not just what you've done, but also what your competitors have already done and the tools to give you that information. Consider the search kind of the inbound component. Do a small scale test when you think you're close to the answer, but you maybe still have a couple outstanding questions to answer there. And then, of course, future-proof this and make sure as the cycle continues, you can do it as well as you need to moving ahead. Which, of course, leads to that increase in ROI we're all looking for here. So I'll leave everybody with this. The paradigm shift of our thinking is that while a lot of people are paying attention to the models, let's pay attention to the data. Data will redefine how we think about those models. This is from Fei Lin, co-founder and CEO of World Labs. Basically, the idea here is, it all comes back to the idea of garbage in, garbage out. We're trying to leverage all of these AI-driven tools to better put together and draw the insights from all the data we're collecting. But if we're not directing those tools to the right data, and if we're not pulling in the right pieces of data to start off with, the output doesn't matter. We're essentially optimizing toward the wrong direction to begin with. So let's make sure we're doing that to achieve the best customer journey and ultimately the best business outcomes. With that, I'll turn it over for any questions. Thank you.
Any questions for Evihn?
If you just want to shout it out at first. We'll Sabin grabs the microphone.
Hi, great presentation, thank you.
Thank you.
You mentioned that when it comes to customer personas, it makes sense to have more granular information, like more granular the better. But then we also run into the problem of having multiple sub-personas in that case. And then how do you effectively balance that out, and how do you target effectively when you have that many personas?
Yeah, so quick caveat to that. I think granular to the extent that it's useful. I mean, you can get lost in the weeds of personas and sub-personas. Granular to the extent that you would be treating that stakeholder, whether it's a patient or HCP or an investor or whatever it is, differently, and there would be an actionable use case for doing so. Yeah, I think when I say granular, I mean more just getting down to specific details that would enable you to develop a more specific customer journey, more specific messaging. Just imagining somebody as an individual rather than kind of an avatar or kind of a behind the scenes. Does that make sense?
Wonderful. Any